What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Crew 2, and in this video I'm going to be going over some of the underrated vehicles in the street class, and I plan on doing this with every single discipline. I'm also most likely going to do a part 2 with the street class as well, because there's a lot of street cars in the game. As you guys can see, there's over 200 vehicles in this class, but for me, I found 4 cars I definitely have to share, starting off with the Mustang Shelby GT500. Now, I do find this to be pretty interesting because I really haven't seen the GT500 used all that much. Now, personally, I really haven't driven this car that much either. It's not that I don't like the car, I just really haven't driven it all that much to really see what it actually can do in some of the events here. Now, I do feel like the Mustang could easily compete in many of the summits here and easily go against like the Porsche 911 GT or the lovely Lamborghini Superleggera. Those are obviously going to be the best street cars in the game, but I have been noticing some of the other street vehicles in the game could easily compete with them. I've been really wanting to test out more of the street vehicles on the Crew 2 because I really do feel like many of the cars are probably going to be a lot better than I think many people think they are, including myself. For example, I probably used the Mustang a lot back in the day, and I really did love this vehicle a lot. It was a lot of fun to use, and surprisingly, this vehicle is going to have some good handling and stability, even though it is a muscle car, so it might have some issues in some areas. I still think this car is going to be pretty dang impressive for the most part. The top speed of this vehicle is going to be around 238 to 240 miles an hour. It kind of depends on the road that you guys are on. I noticed this car can do around 235 as well. Now, I'm sure many players are going to be wondering if the lower top speed on some of these street cars here are going to affect them in a negative way. And to be honest, it really does depend on the event you guys are doing. I actually have another car on this list that does like 232 miles an hour on a good day. And that vehicle is going to be really good on some of these shorter tracks because of the handling and or acceleration it has, which I have noticed the Mustang's going to be in that category as well. One of my favorite things about this car, for one, is the looks of it. Overall, this car looks really good, but the sound of the Mustang is honestly really good. Good job on that Ubisoft as well. But the overall stability and handling of the vehicle, I think, are going to be top tier compared to many of the other street cars. I really do feel like many more players should try out some of the other street vehicles, including myself, because I'm not going to lie, guys, I really haven't used the Superleggera and or the Porsche GT in a long time because I do want to try out other vehicles. I've actually been running the Infiniti, but I have a feeling that's going to change now in the future summits, because I'm planning on mixing it up a lot more and really using vehicles you probably would never see at all. But the Mustang definitely made the first list for the underrated vehicles in the street class because I've been having a really good time with this car. Not only does the handling and stability feel really good, but this car really doesn't lose itself all that much around turns. But one thing I did notice about the Mustang that might take a little time to get used to is the fact that I noticed depending on the turn and or gear that you're in, sometimes the car might lose its back end a little bit depending on the way you guys come out of the turn. Luckily, I noticed upshifting if you guys are in manual was actually getting rid of this issue for me. But let me know what you guys think about the Shelby GT500 in the comments below, and let's move over to the second car on the list. And now moving over to the second car on the list that I do believe is going to be pretty dang underrated as well, is going to be the Berlinetta. Now, I personally haven't really used this car all that much, but I have to admit one thing, I've been really enjoying this vehicle on many of the races I have used it on. Now, this car is going to have one really bad flaw to it, which I do think is one of the reasons why a lot of players probably don't use it, especially compared to like the Porsche GT or the Lamborghini Superleggera. The issue with the Ferrari is the fact that this vehicle only does about 231 miles an hour with top speed, which is honestly going to be pretty dang slow compared to many of the other cars in the street class. Even like the Chevrolet 3100, for example, does like 250 miles an hour, so it's going to be faster than this vehicle. But one of the biggest things I like about this car is the fact that the higher RPMs on it can make this thing a lot easier to actually use going around turns and all that, but also the handling of the Berlinetta does seem to be pretty dang good compared to a lot of the other vehicles I have used. I actually did set a couple of records with this car on some events. Even though the top speed on the Ferrari here is unfortunately going to be kind of lower compared to many of the other street cars, I still found this car to be really good compared to a lot of them in general. Now, I would say having a lower top speed might be a bit of a problem doing some of the longer street races because, well, if you can only do 230 miles an hour and then obviously your opponents are using like a Lamborghini Superleggera, they're probably going to be doing over 250 the entire time. If you guys were to use this on a summit on some of those tracks, they will basically be doing over 250 miles an hour, so it's going to be hard to keep up with them on the bigger open tracks there. And if you guys were to run this on like a summit or something like that, you're most likely going to fall behind and or get a lower score just because the car really doesn't have that top speed ability. But one thing I did notice about the Berlinetta that I really do like about it is the way the Berlinetta is going to handle on some of the more lap focused events here on the Crew 2. For example, the Harlem West and or East. Even the flashback Japan race, I feel like the Berlinetta is going to do a great job on, because you really don't have to focus on the lower top speed of the vehicle, and I really do think the handling and stability of the Berlinetta is going to be a lot better than many of the other street cars I have tested out in the game. The higher RPM on this vehicle is really going to help it out a lot. The fact this vehicle redlines past 8,000 RPM, you can really be in different gears when going around turns and coming out of them. You can also find that right gear a lot easier. Sometimes when you guys have to shift the cars a lot faster, like the Mustang for example, it can get a little more difficult, because you can definitely be in the wrong gear a little bit easier. But having a vehicle like this, I think could be a great way to really get used to like a manual transmission or trying to shift a little bit better. So I do think the Berlinetta is going to be a great aspect for that. But let me know what you guys think about the Berlinetta in the comments below, and I definitely recommend trying this car out on some of the track-focused races with a lot of laps and all that, because I really feel like that's where this car is really going to shine. But anyway, let's move over to the third car on the list. And now moving over to the third vehicle on the list is going to be the Nissan Gtr Nismo. Now I personally haven't really driven this car all that much because it's going to be fairly new, releasing recently, and I'm actually really digging this vehicle a lot. Now this thing is part of the Elite Bundle 11, well it was anyway. I do believe this car can be bought now just by itself, but let me know in the comments below if you guys still have to buy this vehicle in the bundle. But regardless, the GTR really has blown my mind. Not only have they finally added the newer version of this vehicle, which I have to admit, I love how Nissans look in real life. I think the Nismo is beautiful. I love the carbon fiber, the overall color of this vehicle. The design of the GTR is honestly incredible. And now we have a newer one on the crew too. And not only that, this car also performs really well. If you guys might have been wondering, the top speed of the GTR is going to be around 254 miles an hour, which is going to be very competitive compared to many of the other street cars in the game, and also a lot better than some of the other ones I have used. Now I do think the top speed of the Nissan being 254 miles an hour is going to put this car in like a sweet spot compared to some of the other street vehicles. It's not going to be under 240 like a lot of the other cars that have good handling do, and with the car doing over 250 miles an hour is basically going to put it more toward the Superleggera and the 911 GT, and with the Nissan doing over 250 miles an hour is going to get it closer to like the likes of the Superleggera and or the 911 GT, which we all know how good those cars are actually going to be. The 911 GT seems to have more stability and or handling over the Superleggera, while that car is going to be about 10 or 12 miles an hour faster. So I'm going to say this car is going to be in the middle. Now from the testing I have done with the Nismo, I'm actually pretty dang impressed with this vehicle so far. I really haven't seen too many people use the Nissan in general on here, but I do think that is going to change now. This vehicle not only can handle and has really good stability, it does over 250 miles an hour, which will allow it to basically compete against those vehicles in other events. We know how the longer street events are going to be a bit of a challenge for some of the other vehicles. For example, one of my other favorite cars is the Infiniti Q60, and that car only does 237 miles an hour. So on the longer events, that car is going to struggle really hard because some of the other vehicles can beat it by over 20 miles an hour, which is going to make a huge difference in a summit if you guys are going after scoring and all that. I would say some cars are definitely going to struggle compared to others. Now something like the Nismo that can actually handle pretty dang good, also has good stability and doesn't like lose itself around turns or might have issues speeding up and all that, which I did notice that on the GTR a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, I thought this car was a little bit slow when accelerating, but I noticed the biggest thing, guys, is using the nitrous as much as you can. That definitely helps this car tremendously. But let me know what you guys think about the Nismo in the comments below, because I know this car is fairly new, but I do believe this car has a lot of potential to it, and I can't wait to test this thing out more in the future. But let's move over to one of my favorite underrated vehicles so far. And now moving over to what I think is one of the most underrated cars in the street class is going to be the Lamborghini Huracan Lp 610-4. This actually used to be one of my favorite street cars to use back in the day before I started using the Superleggera. Now something told me to go check out the Lamborghini once again. And well guys, you will definitely not be disappointed if you do try out the Huracan again right now, because I'm kind of mind blown with how good this car actually is. Not only does this thing handle amazingly, but also does 258 to 260 miles an hour, almost giving it the exact same top speed as the Superleggera as well. And it's been making me more excited to try out other street cars, because now that I know some of these other underrated vehicles and or cars I never see being used can actually compete with like the 911 and or the Superleggera is just so awesome to see. I will definitely be trying out other vehicles in this class and making more underrated videos in the future. I will also be covering other vehicle classes as well, guys, so definitely stay tuned for that. But back to the Lamborghini now. So one of the biggest things I also noticed about this vehicle is not only is this car going to be really fast, but I'm literally mind blown by the handling of this car as well. I decided to take this vehicle into some of these street races, like one of my favorite ones, like the Flashback Japan. I got a really good score on that race with this vehicle as well. I seem to be a lot faster with it compared to some of the other street cars I normally run, including the Infiniti, which I would definitely say the Lamborghini here is going to be way faster than the Infiniti. Not only is the top speed going to be better, but this car also handles very similar to it. When you have a combo like that in a vehicle, it's going to be really hard to touch that. Not only that, but I really do love the look of the Huracan, plus the sound of this car is awesome. Ever since I got to go in this car on a racetrack a couple of years ago, I've always loved Lamborghinis even more. Like, they're just honestly incredible machines. I cannot believe the engineering behind these cars. And having the fact that we have vehicles like this in these games that can perform really well just makes it a lot more fun. Now that we have vehicles like the Huracan here that can actually go against like the Superleggera, I really do think the street class is going to get mixed up a lot more in the future, because I find myself using every single car but those and still getting really good times on them as well. Now, one thing I really do want to talk about is going to be the handling of the Huracan, because I have noticed this vehicle is obviously all-wheel drive, and it definitely handles like that. My goodness, this thing literally sticks around corners. It doesn't really over or understeer that much either from what I have noticed. I did have to tweak the car a little bit with its handling, which, by the way, guys, I will be showing all the settings of these vehicles at the end of the video if you are interested. Now, if you guys have not tried out the Lamborghini Huracan, I highly recommend it. Now, I did have to tweak this car a bit, as I mentioned before, because I was having some issues with it, and well, the car wasn't handling all that great. I messed with the ARBs and all that, and now this car is literally eating turns. I'm literally finding myself beating all my times in most of the events with it, so I really do feel like the Huracan is definitely going to be one of the top tiered street cars in the game if people really do start trying this vehicle out. I highly recommend giving this thing a try if you guys have not, and so far I've been noticing a lot of the street cars actually are really good, but I just have not seen a lot of players use them, so I really do want to test more of them out in the future. But let me know what you guys think about these cars in the comments below. It is honestly so great seeing other vehicles really pop out in some of these classes, but definitely stay tuned for future videos with other underrated cars in the street class. I will also be doing other vehicle classes as well, so definitely stay tuned for that. I'm also planning on doing another video on the Lamborghini Huracan, because this car is honestly mind-blowing, and I really do want to show people what this car is capable of. But again, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below, and thank you all so much for watching.